Hey, welcome. So I noticed that the last post that I put was only about 21 seconds. I apologize for that. I don't know why that happened. I've been having some technical difficulties uploading to YouTube. So I'm going to repeat the lesson that for some reason wasn't able to upload. I'll do that tonight. And I apologize for the delay. I will get that up for you. Okay, so let's start. We left off at the uh, book of Exodus, and we're on chapter 19, which is a very important chapter because it's the giving of the book of the law, the covenant. Okay, just share my screen here with you guys. Okay. Okay, so here we are. Right. So as we get to chapter 19, this is the second part of Exodus where we have the Sinai covenant. So this is our fourth covenant of the scriptures. We saw the covenant with Adam, the covenant with Noah, the covenant with Abraham, and now the covenant with Moses. So we only have one more covenant in the Old Testament after this. And this covenant is the Mosaic covenant, which is very important. It makes Israel a nation, the chosen people of God. And it's fulfilling the promises of Abraham that they would become a great nation. And we see that after in verse 1, in the third month after their departure from the land of Egypt, on its first day, the Israelites came to the desert of Sinai. After the journey from Rephidim to the deserts of Sinai, they pitched camp. While Israel was encamped here in front of the mountain, Moses went up the mountain to God. Then the Lord called to him and said, "Thus shall you say to the house of Jacob, tell the Israelites, you have seen for yourselves how I treated the Egyptians and how I bore you up on eagle wings and brought you here to myself. Therefore, if you hearken to my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my special possession, dearer to me than all other people, though all the earth is mine. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation." That is what you must tell the Israelites. Okay, so here we're going to have Moses. We have the beginning of some very important ideas going on. So just to kind of sum up what we're going to see, this covenant at Sinai represents, this is a big development. They've been liberated from Egypt, and now we're going to see an establishment of a formal covenant between God and the nation. So this is the first time we're seeing Israel being given a covenant as a special chosen nation. And the point of this covenant is this: it's to transform Israel into a kingdom of priests and to make them a holy nation. So when you look at that, you see verse 6 there. Let me see if I can highlight this here because it's important. Okay, I'm going to highlight this for you. Okay, and you see here, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. That is what you must tell the Israelites. So God wants them to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation because of this covenant. But even though they're a chosen nation at this point, the point is that they are to be like priests. They are to be a holy nation. For what purpose? To serve as God's representatives to all the other nations, the Gentiles, and fulfill the ancestral promises made to Abraham, the ancestral promises to Abraham. that all the world will find blessing. And it was supposed to have started here, that they were to be priests and a holy nation, not for just themselves, not just an exclusive club, if you will, where God only loved them and no one else, but they would be God's special possession and a nation dear to him for the other nations, to bring the other nations into the love of the true God. And they will fail at this. So we have a theophany first, which is a revelation of God on Sinai, and then this legislation. We'll see the Decalogue will be given to Moses and the Book of the Covenant. And then we're going to see how God will inform Moses that they are to build a tabernacle. In other words, a place where God will be worshipped. And then the priesthood will be instituted, the Aaronic priesthood, and a system of sacrificial rites. And this was all to make them a holy people. But we're going to end and see that there will be a crisis of infidelity with the sin of the golden calf. So notice God says, I bore you up in verse 4 on eagle wings. In other words, God's care here for Israel is likened to an eagle, making them a chosen possession above all peoples. And they're to be a kingdom of priests, as we said in verse 6, a holy nation. Kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So just as priests are nearer to God than lay people, if you will, Israel is to be distinguished by her piety and morality to serve as a bridge between God and the other nations. So they're to be a holy nation, not the only nation, but a holy nation, a nation of priests, so that the other nations will look at them and say, this is the way we should be. They were to be the example. They were to be the evangelists, if you will, the missionaries to bring the truth of Yahweh to all by their holiness. So Moses went and summoned, verse 7, the elders of the people. When he set before them all that the Lord had ordered him to tell them, the people all answered, everything the Lord has said we will do. Then Moses brought back to the Lord the response of the people. So here we have the people making essentially a covenant oath. Verse 9, the Lord also told them, I am coming to you in a dense cloud, so that when the people hear me speaking with you, they may always have faith in you also. The Lord added, go to the people and have them sanctify themselves today and tomorrow, make them wash their garments. So before this covenant is to be ratified, the people must undergo a period of sanctification. They are to be ready for the third day. From the third day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai before the eyes of all the people. But even though they are to be sanctified, set limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, take care not to go up the mountain or even to touch its base. If anyone touches the mountain, he must be put to death. No hand shall touch him. He must be stoned to death or killed with arrows. Such a man or a beast must not be allowed to live. Only when the ram's horn resounds may they go up to the mountain. And so Moses comes down and he tells the people to sanctify themselves and wash their garments, be ready for the third day, have no intercourse with any women. So they are to maintain this sanctification by having no intercourse as well. So this sanctification, this washing of the garments, this abstaining from sexual activity was a symbol of interior cleanliness and observing strict boundaries around the holy mountain where trespassing is punishable by death is to show God's holiness. So on the morning of the third day, here we have the theophany. There were peals of thunder and lightning and a heavy cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people in the camp trembled. But Moses led the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stationed themselves at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was all wrapped in smoke, for the Lord came down upon it in a fire. The smoke rose from it as though from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. The trumpet blast grew louder and louder while Moses was speaking, and God answering him with thunder. When the Lord came down to the top of Mount Sinai, he summoned Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up to him. The Lord told Moses, go down and warn the people not to break through toward the Lord in order to see him, otherwise many of them will be struck down. The priests, too, who approach the Lord must sanctify themselves, else he will vent his anger upon them. So God requires holiness and sanctification and limits where those who are not priests can't cross. Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot go up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us to set limits around the mountain to make it sacred. The Lord repeated, go down now, then come up again along with Aaron. But the priests and the people must not break through to come up to the Lord, else he will vent his anger upon them. So Moses went down to the people and told them this. Then God delivered all these commandments. So here we have the Decalogue. The Decalogue is what we call the 10 Commandments, literally the 10 words. These are the fundamental principles of religion and morality. They're not exclusive to Israel, and they're basically the natural law. They don't require a unique revelation from God to understand these commandments. I mean, you shall not kill. We don't require a Bible or the revelation of God to know that this is natural law. But God here clarifies the natural law. He makes it clear. He encodes it for the people. So these are universal. The first 3 are duties to God first, and then 7 duties to our neighbor. And this is the natural law encoded by God and clarified. And then as we get to we have the Decalogue first. And as we get to verse 23, and we keep going here, we begin to have, actually pick it up at chapter 21. These are the rules you shall lay before the people, says God. Now, this is basically the book of the covenant here. The book of the covenant. And in chapter 21 and following, all the way into chapter 23, we have here the development of the Decalogue more detailed, a detailed code. These are national laws for the people, but they're ethical. So there's specific instructions on such topics as social justice, generosity, and then cultic worship. In other words, the cult, how they are to work, how they are to worship, excuse me. So religion in ancient times without ritual is inconceivable. So notice that God adds here not only laws of morality and ethical rules, social justice, but also cultic worship, because to the ancients, religion has to have ritual. The ritual legislation is an essential element of the covenant, providing the physical means through which Israel would become a holy people. So not only by obeying the Decalogue in our duties to God and our neighbor, but also by becoming a holy people via the cult, via worship. And then, of course, we will have the tabernacle described. The tabernacle will be the sacred tent that God will have Moses make, composed of an outer courtyard, an outer room, and then an inner room, which is called the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place. And this tabernacle that God tells Moses to build as a place of worship will be an image of heaven, the heavenly temple. But the heavenly temple is also imaged, as we saw in Genesis, through the Garden of Eden, where God dwells with Adam and Eve. So here God is going to dwell again. It's going to be a portable Eden, if you will, a new Eden, to get back to the original state of intimacy between God and humanity. So God is going to be present and intimate with his people in this tabernacle. Okay. So if we move into the covenant is enacted in 24. Moses is told, come up with Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and 70 of the elders. You shall all worship at some distance. Moses alone is to come close to the Lord. The others shall not come too near, and the people shall not come up at all with Moses. When Moses came to the people and related all the words and ordinances of the Lord, they all answered with one voice, we will do everything that the Lord has told us. Moses then wrote down all the words of the Lord, and rising early the next day, he erected at the foot of the mountain an altar and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And having sent certain young men of the Israelites to offer holocausts and sacrifice young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord, Moses took half of the blood and put it in large bowls. The other half he splashed on the altar. Taking the book of the covenant, so here are what I mentioned you, this is the book of the covenant, the additional laws, in addition to the Decalogue that God writes on stone, these are written by Moses, revealed to him by God. He reads it aloud to the people, who says, all that the Lord has said we will heed and do. This is a covenant oath. So God makes an oath to keep his promises, and the people make an oath to keep their promises. Then he took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, saying, this is the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words of his. Moses then went up with Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel. When they beheld the God of Israel, under his feet there appeared to be sapphire tile work as clear as the sky. Yet he did not smite these chosen Israelites. After gazing on God, they could still eat and drink. This is the covenant meal. The Lord then said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain, and while you're there, I will give you the stone tablets on which I have written the commandments intended for the people's instruction. So Moses set out with Joshua and went up to the mountain of God. The elders were told to wait until Moses and Joshua would return to them, and Aaron and Hur would stay with the people. If anyone has a complaint, let them refer the matter to them. And after Moses had gone up, a cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord settled upon Mount Sinai. The cloud covered it for 6 days, and on the seventh day he called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord was seen as a consuming fire on the mountaintop. But Moses passed into the midst of the cloud as he went up on the mountain. There he stayed for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay? And God mentions the sanctuary and the dwelling to Moses. Specific sacred objects that are mentioned are the Ark of the Covenant, which is a golden box made of acacia wood, which was to be kept in the center, most holy place of the tabernacle, the tent of worship. This is literally the center of God's presence, the Ark of the Covenant. There was no holier objects because God would dwell above this ark in the Shekinah glory cloud. Then there's a table and a lampstand. This was the furniture of the inner sanctuary, the holy place. On the table would be put showbread, and the lampstand is the 7-branch candelabra, or the menorah that you sometimes see Hanukkah. Then there was an altar in the courtyard, which was for the sacrificial offerings, the altar of burnt offerings, it was called. It was used for sacrifice, because blood would be sprinkled as a special union between Yahweh and his people. As we saw the covenant, Moses sprinkles the blood of animals on the altar and the people. Blood represents life, and a life is given as a sacrifice for God. So there had to be blood. There had to be animal sacrifice. God required life. So in addition, inside the tent was the altar of incense. And this altar of incense, they would burn incense to signify worship going up to God. And there was also a bronze laver in the outer court where the priests would wash themselves for purification. So all of this is described, this tabernacle, here in chapter 26. Okay, chapter 27. The altar is described. Okay, and now we reach chapter 28, where we see the Aaronic priesthood being established. The priestly office will be assigned to Aaron and his descendants. The high priesthood is distinguished by specific vestments that they will wear, which will sanctify and set the priest apart for divine service. Notice the sacred vestments are mentioned. Okay, the breastpiece, the ephod, the robe, the tunic, the mitre, the sash, right? The priest is to wear these, symbolizing him being set apart for God, being different. So all of this describes these sacred vestments, which Aaron, okay, and the rite that we perform to consecrate these priests. Okay, anointing oils. They will be anointed with oils. Animal sacrifices, okay, are mentioned for the consecration of the priests. And this moves on into chapter 29. All of this is referring to the priests. Then it refers in chapter 30 what incense the priests are to burn. Okay, how the altar of incense is to be designed. The altar is in place. There'd be a veil between it and the ark, symbolizing the veil between God and his people. And the incense is described. Okay. Then we move into how they are to cleanse themselves in the bronze laver. These are called ablutions, cleansing, washing their hands so that they are purified for worship. Okay. And it describes who is going to make this tabernacle. Bezalel from the tribe of Judah, okay, and Oholiab of the tribe of Dan. These are to be the skilled craftsmen in helping to make this tabernacle for God. And then it talks about the Sabbath. Verse 18, when the Lord had finished, of chapter 31, speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave them the 2 tablets of the commandments, the stone tablets inscribed by God's own finger. Okay, now we reach a crisis. Chapter 32. So God is establishing a new Eden with his people by describing this tabernacle and these laws to make them a holy nation. Well, here we have their fall. The golden calf is the fruit, the forbidden fruit of Israel. As Adam and Eve committed the sin and were expelled from Eden due to the forbidden fruit, the Hebrews here will commit the sin of the golden calf and will be separated from the portable Eden. In other words, God's presence will be different with them after the sin of the golden calf. So the Israelites break the first 2 commandments of the covenant by commissioning a golden calf. When the people became aware of Moses' delay, chapter 32, in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who will be our leader. As for the man Moses who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." How ironic. Make us a god, right? Make us a god who will be our leader. Oh, God is right on the mountain, right near them. And Aaron replied, "Have your wives and your sons and your daughters take off their gold earrings and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron, who accepted their offering, and fashioning this gold with a graving tool made a molten calf. Then they cried out, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." Aaron built an altar before the calf and proclaimed, "Tomorrow's a feast of the Lord." And the next day the people offered holocausts and brought peace offerings. Then they sat down to eat and drink and rose up to revel. This was probably most likely fertility rites, which were pagan rites, in front of this pagan idol. Now, this is clearly idolatry because they demand, the word is Elohim, which is usually, it's a plural word, but it's a word that also can be used for the one true God. But in this case, the idolatry is abandonment of Yahweh's leadership. In other words, Aaron, in making this bull, he frames the feast as being to Yahweh. So the bull is supposed to represent Yahweh, but it debases God because it's making a graven image of God, which is forbidden, but using a false God. The bull image comes from the Egyptian Apis god, the bull god, and the Canaanite Baal. So even though Aaron is trying to make it a representation of Yahweh, it's forbidden to represent God like this in the form of a pagan idol. So verse 7, the Lord said to Moses, go down at once to your people. Notice your people. In other words, they haven't shown themselves to be worthy as God's people. God wants them, right, as his people. But now go to your people, Moses, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt, for they have become depraved. Notice he doesn't say, whom I brought out, you brought out. Already we see the separation. They have soon turned aside from the way I pointed out to them, making for themselves a molten calf and worshiping it, sacrificing to it, crying out, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. I see how stiff-necked this people is, continued the Lord to Moses. Let me alone, then, that my wrath may blaze up against them to consume them. Then I will make of you a great nation. So God isn't totally shutting down his plan. He's going to go to plan B and make another nation out of Moses. I mean, think of the privilege that Moses will have here. He can rid himself of these troublesome people, these complainers, and God can start anew and make from Moses a great nation for himself. But Moses implored the Lord, why, O Lord, should your wrath blaze up against your own people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt with such great power and with so strong a hand? Why should the Egyptians say, well, with evil intent he brought them out, that he might kill them in the mountains and exterminate them from the face of the earth? Let your blazing wrath die down. Relent in punishing your people. Remember your servant Abraham, Isaac, Israel, and how you swore to them by your own self, saying, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. And all this land that I promised, I will give your descendants as their perpetual heritage. So what does Moses do here? He reminds God of his covenant promises. He says, it'll look bad against you, Lord, because you did all this for this people, and the Egyptians in the end will say, well, God did all this for this people and then killed them. And remember the promise you made to Abraham and his descendants, that you would make us a holy nation, that you would give us this land, and that the world would be blessed in us. 14, so the Lord relented in the punishment he had threatened to inflict on his people. So God is merciful. He's gracious. He's slow to anger and abounding in covenant faithfulness. But he's also just, right? He's going to punish the wicked. God must deal with evil in order to remain good. He can't just ignore it. So God's mercy and justice are two aspects of God. God's mercy on the cross required God's justice. So Moses comes down the mountain in 32:15 with the two tablets of the commandments in his hands, tablets that were written on both sides, front and back, tablets that were made by God, having inscriptions on them that were engraved by God himself. Now, when Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, that sounds like a battle in the camp. But Moses answered, it does not sound like cries of victory, nor does it sound like cries of defeat. The sounds that I hear are cries of revelry. In other words, the people are partying. As he drew near the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing. With that, Moses' wrath flared up, so that he threw the tablets down and broke them on the base of the mountain. So this symbolizes that they have broken God's law. Taking the calf they had made, he fused it in the fire and then ground it down into powder, which he scattered on the water and made the Israelites drink. This will be the punishment in the Mosaic law for adultery as well. And so they are committing adultery. They are abandoning their true spouse. Their groom is God, and they are the bridegroom. But they've gone over to this false God, this false husband. Baal literally can mean husband, but God is their husband, not the bull god. Moses asked Aaron, what did this people ever do to you? that you should lead them into so grave a sin? Aaron replied, let not my Lord be angry. You know well enough how prone the people are to evil. They said to me, make us a god to be our leader. As for the man Moses who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. So I told them, let anyone who has gold or jewelry take it off. They gave it to me, and I threw it into the fire, and this calf came out. This is probably one of the lamest excuses in the Bible from Aaron. When Moses realized, to the scornful joy of their foes, Aaron had let the people run wild, he stood at the gate of the camp and cried, whoever is for the Lord, let him come to me. And the Levites rallied to him. And they will go throughout the camp and administer God's justice on the wicked people. So Moses says to the Levites, today you have been dedicated to the Lord, because they go throughout the camp and execute judgment on the people. They were against their own sons and kinsmen. So the Levites are going to be special, and this is the origin of the Levitical priesthood. And the next day, Moses said to the people, you've committed a grave sin. I will go up to the Lord, then perhaps I may be able to make atonement for your sin. So Moses went back to the Lord and said, this people has indeed committed a grave sin in making a god of gold for themselves. If you would only forgive their sin, if you will not, then strike me out of the book that you have written. Wow. Moses is truly a Christ figure here. He's willing to give his own life for the people. The Lord answered, him only who has sinned against me will I strike out of my book. Now go and lead the people whither I have told you. My angel will go before you. When it's time for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin. Thus the Lord smote the people for having had Aaron make the calf for them. So the covenant needs to be renewed because the people have sinned. So in chapter 33, God warns them not to be contaminated from the Canaanite influences when they go into the land that God will give them. They're going to be tempted to be like the Canaanites. They're to destroy any altars and stone pillars, which were to the god Baal. They would destroy any wooden poles, which were to Asherah, Baal's consort. And they will fail in this. We'll see that many of them give into the pagan worship. That's why God told them to destroy it, but they don't. So God warns them. So Moses pitches the tent, and verse 9, chapter 33, as Moses entered the tent, the column of cloud would come down and stand at its entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. On seeing the column of cloud stand at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise and worship at the entrance of their own tents. The Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as one man speaks to another. Moses would then return to the camp. Joshua would not move out of the tent. Moses said to the Lord, you are telling me to lead this people on, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said you are my intimate friend, and also you have found favor with me. Now, if I found favor with you, do not let me know your ways. Do let me know your ways, so that in knowing you, I may continue to find favor with you. Then too, this nation is after all your own people. I myself, the Lord answered, will go along to give you rest. So Moses says let me see your glory. And God says in Exodus 33:19, I will make all my beauty pass before you, and in your presence I will pronounce my name, Lord, Yahweh. I who show favors to whom I will, I who grant mercy to whom I will. But my face you cannot see, for no man sees me and still lives. Here is a place near me where you shall station yourself on the rock. When my glory passes, I will set you in the hollow of the rock and will cover you with my hand until I pass by. Then I will remove my hand so that you may see my back, but my face is not to be seen. Wow, Moses is going to see the glory of the Lord. Moses will have intimate intercourse with Yahweh. And Moses' face will actually emit horns, which is not horns like as an animal, but rays of light, a physical manifestation of divine proximity, which the Israelites, because of their sinfulness, could not look at. Moses will have to wear a veil when speaking to the people, and he removes it, though, when he's speaking to God. So Moses has to Notice here, the Lord says to Moses, cut 2 new stone tablets, that I might write on them the commandments which were on the former tablets that you broke. So now they have to make new tablets, but Moses has to cut them. And the Lord passes before Moses when he goes up. And the Lord passed before him, Exodus 34:6, and cries out, the Lord, a merciful and gracious God, slow to anger, rich in kindness and fidelity. So this is, as I mentioned before, God is merciful, continuing his kindness for 1,000 generations, and forgiving wickedness and crime and sin, yet not declaring the guilty guiltless, but punishing children and grandchildren to the 3rd and 4th generation for their father's wickedness. In other words, God is also just, right? He has to deal with evil in order to remain good. Moses bows down and worships God. So the covenant is renewed, and the warning is made. And as we reach, Moses comes down the mountain, verse 30, Exodus 34:29. As Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the commandments in his hands, he did not know that the skin of his face had become radiant while he conversed with the Lord. When Aaron then and the other Israelites saw Moses, and noticed how radiant the skin of his face had become, they were afraid to come near him. Only after Moses called to them did Aaron and the rulers of the community come back to him. Moses then spoke to them. Later on, all the Israelites came up to him, and he joined on them all that the Lord had told him on Mount Sinai. When he finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. Whenever Moses entered the presence of the Lord to converse with them, he removed the veil until he came out again. On coming out, he would tell the Israelites all that had been commanded. Then the Israelites would see the skin of Moses' face was radiant, so he would go again and put the veil over his face until he went in to converse with the Lord. So as we hit 35 to the end, 40, we have the conclusion. So we have again a repetition of the tabernacle design and all of the ritual laws of worship. So this continues here, the tabernacle being described, the furniture in the tabernacle. Remember, outside the altar of holocaust and the bronze laver. In the holy place, the altar of incense and the menorah and the table of showbread. And in the Holy of Holies itself, with a veil in front, the Ark of the Covenant. And this represented Eden, the symbolism of how the colors and the depictions of trees and gems and different types of rubies and topaz and the different stones, the precious stones on the priests. All of this alludes back to Eden. So the tabernacle was to represent a portable Eden where God's presence would dwell among the people. But notice there is a veil now. There is a veil in front of the Holy of Holies. And the people cannot enter into God's presence like they used to be because of their sin at the golden calf. So Aaron and his descendants, the high priests, were not allowed to enter into that veil. Only one day, Yom Kippur, because they had to atone. They had to sacrifice a bull to atone from the sin of the golden calf. And this will be written in the Torah, the later laws of Moses. So chapter 40, verse 34, then the cloud covered the meeting tent, and the glory of the Lord filled the dwelling. Moses could not enter the meeting tent because the cloud settled down upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the dwelling. Notice the difference. Moses could not enter the meeting tent. Whenever the cloud rose from the dwelling, the Israelites would set out on a journey. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not go forward. Only when it lifted did they go forward. In the daytime, the cloud of the Lord was seen over the dwelling, whereas at night, fire was seen in the cloud by the whole house of Israel in all the stages of their journey, the whole house of Israel in all the stages of their journey. So the book concludes with the execution of the ritual precepts and the manifestation of the glory of Yahweh, right, over this tabernacle. Verse 34, the cloud covered the meeting tent, or overshadowed, the same word that is used by the angel to describe how God will overshadow Mary, and she will conceive God's presence in her. So the tabernacle is finished according to the blueprints, and God's presence dwells among the people to direct their march. But despite the presence of the tabernacle, the book ends on a note of tension. Moses is unable to enter the tent. Verse 35, chapter 40. This suggests that the damage caused by Israel's sin has not been fully reconciled. So there is a threat to the future covenantal relationship. How is God going to, rectify this in the future? And we will see. We will see. Okay, so that concludes the beginning of the covenant with Israel through Moses, which is our fourth covenant of the Old Testament. So next time, we'll recap the story of the rest of what happens with Moses and the people. And then we'll get into a description of the time of the judges. And we will look at the beginning of the monarchy, because that is when we will have our fifth covenant instituted with King David and his son Solomon, the covenant with David, the promises to David. One final thing strikes me as I'm reading through this, Exodus 19 to 40. You see so much ritual. You see altars. You see incense. You see oils. You see bread. Blood is mentioned. Covenant meals are mentioned. Priests with vestments. Images in the tabernacle. Wait, I thought that they weren't supposed to have images. This truly shows that the only religion today that corresponds to the old covenant is Catholicism. And I guess you could also say Orthodox, but not completely. In Catholicism, we have the complete fulfillment. We have a priesthood, we have vestments, we have altars, we have a menorah or candles, we have incense, we have a sacrifice that's a meal, yet blood being offered. We have images. See, Protestantism goes too far because it tries to strip of all the physical aspects of worship that were willed by God in the Old Covenant. Now, it's not the same system of worship that's been fulfilled in Jesus Christ, but God still wills physical aspects of his worship. And this is the New Testament church, the sacraments, the Mass, the priesthood. We don't have it in the Catholic Church. So for someone to say that God forbids saints and crucifixes and images of Mary and the saints, well, the Jewish people knew that it was forbidden to have what? Graven images. Not images. There were images in the tabernacle representing Eden. There were images of angels. There were images of trees and stars and birds and fish and stones, precious stones. Why would God command the Jewish people to do that if it was against the first commandment? Because the first commandment forbids idolatry, worshiping images as God. But honoring is not against the first commandment. We honor Mary and the saints, right? We adore the Lord Jesus Christ, not the crucifix itself, but what it represents. Son of God. We can adore Jesus. He's the Son of God. After all, Jesus is physical. He's not just spiritual. For someone to say everything has to be spiritual, that's not biblical. We're creatures of matter. God made the material universe. We're not Platonists, where matter is considered evil or bad and we don't want it in worship. Why should we go into a church that is stripped of everything? We're material beings. God assumed human nature. God works through matter. We're supposed to have incense and altars and candles and smells and bells, vestments. We're supposed to have a sacrifice that's involved in a meal. That's what the Last Supper was. That's what the Eucharist is. It's a sacrifice and a meal. For someone to say this stuff is not biblical, that this stuff was invented by a medieval church or a church after Constantine, is totally incorrect. This was the early church. This is in Scripture. Jesus says, right? This is the new covenant in my blood, right? Do this in memory of me. Do what? Offer the bread and wine as his body and blood. Make present the sacrifice of Calvary forever. Not a new sacrifice, the same sacrifice, just in a different manner. Christ only dies once, right? We don't sacrifice Christ over and over again, as the book of Hebrews says. There's only one sacrifice of Christ, one bloody sacrifice. But the Mass represents that one bloody sacrifice in an unbloody manner at every Mass. Same sacrifice, Calvary, different manner. So that's what I note when I read this. Where's a church where you see a priesthood, where you see vestments, where you see a Mass, an altar, the offering of a victim, bread and wine, candles, angels, images of angels. The Jewish people had no problem having two statues of angels in the Holy of Holies, in the temple, and over the Ark of the Covenant. If that was forbidden, why would God tell them to make that? Why should we be offended of statues of angels and saints in our place of worship? Right? They're not God. They're not idols. Just as the Jewish people had images of angels, they remind them of holiness, of those we honor as we worship the one true God. The great cloud of witnesses, Hebrews says. Who are the great cloud of witnesses? The saints. Revelation speaks of the saints in heaven. What are they doing? They're worshiping God, right? They're not dead people. They're worshiping God. Their bodies are in the grave, but they're actively at worship in heaven. They're the great cloud of witnesses. So let's conclude. Next time, we'll take a look at leading up to our fifth covenant, which is the covenant with David. Thank you and God bless.